Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. The story begins as a man is getting absolutely destroyed while training, and he fears that he will not survive. A group of onlookers are glad to see that he has improved over the past couple of years, and they determine that the upcoming E-rank test won't be a problem for him. A while later, entrants for the E-rank promotion test are registered. Our protagonist Rick is one of them, and the receptionist named Alyssa is happy to see him again. It's been 2 years since they last saw each other, and it was when Rick used to be a guild clerk. She was surprised to hear that Rick became an adventurer, and he can't blame her because starting off as an adventurer at age 30 is pretty unthinkable. Normally people start off as F-rank apprentices when they are teenagers and become E-rank just 2 years after that. Alyssa wonders where he has been, so Rick explains that he was up in the mountains training with some senior adventurers. Some unruly drunk guy tries to make advances towards Alyssa, but Rick calms him down. Everyone's attention turns to them when the guy passes out, so Rick reminds everyone to drink responsibly. Alyssa gives him his exam ticket and wishes Rick luck on the E-rank test. Rick is horrified though when his ticket has the really unlucky number of 4242. Outside, Rick tells some girl named Rionette that he finished registering, and she reminds him where her eyes are. Back inside, everyone is shocked to see an imprint of Rick's hand on the drunk guy's armor because it's made of steel. What's even more shocking is that the drunk guy is an infamous former A-rank adventurer. His name is Domo the Fiendish Knight, and he is a wanted criminal. Alyssa is then shocked when she wonders if Rick has become strong enough to easily leave an imprint in steel armor. A while later, Rick's height is measured, and the examiners are shocked to see that he's 32 years old. After that, participants have their magical energy tested by putting their hands on a crystal ball. A couple guys get D- and one girl gets a C+. Rick's turn is next, but the light he generates from the crystal is pathetic, and he's given an F-. The others have never seen a score so low, and they hope they never end up like Rick. Rick leaves, but the examiner is shocked when the crystal ball breaks. The next exam has participants attack something to measure the force they can generate. The device can absorb insanely powerful attacks, so participants are told not to hold back. This device is a slime bag, and a look into the past shows someone teaching Rick about it. He was told that the human body is the foundation of a good fighter, regardless of what weapons or magic they have. Rick was instructed to destroy the golden slime bag with his bare hands, because once he could do that, he will have built a body that he could trust. However, this golden slime bag is known for being as strong as dragon's teeth. Rick was sure that he wouldn't be able to destroy it with his bare hands, but he was told that doing so is simple for an adventurer. His instructor revealed that he could destroy 200 at once and demonstrated a bit of his power. Rick had to work his way up by hitting the bag with 50,000 punches every single day. Back to the present, one guy impresses everyone when he attacks a bag using strengthening magic. Some little guy is up next, and he declares that the time to show his strength has finally come. This kid is the second son of the Duke, and rumors say that even though he's just 11 years old, he has magic equivalent to a C rank. This child prodigy then shocks everyone when he prepares his attack. His setup is truly a grand display, but everyone is shocked when the attack turns out to be a tiny fireball. Everyone is still impressed by the damage it does, and they call him a genius. Rick is in awe as well, because the kid used level 3 nature composed blaze magic. Another look back at Rick's training shows some little girl using an insanely powerful fire attack on him. Both attacks were blaze attacks, but they looked really different, so Rick wonders if the kid compressed his for indoor use. Soon it is Rick's turn, but the examiner doesn't expect much from him. If magic isn't trained at a young age, then the chances for growth later in life is impossible. On top of that, Rick's results from the magic test were pitiful, so the examiner recommends that Rick just give up now. Rick actually agrees with everything he said, but he can't help but think back to his training. Rick was exhausted from punching the bag one day, but he refused to give up. Rick acknowledges that he started his journey really late, but he believes that his age shouldn't matter. Because of this, Rick strikes the bag and shocks everyone when he absolutely destroys it with a single punch. Rick doesn't even know his own strength though, as he wonders if the bag was just defective. Everyone watches in terror as they wonder who he is. The kid is furious at Rick for stealing the attention, but he plans to show off during the defensive ability test. Moments later though, we see that everyone is shocked again when Rick defends against level 4 nature composed magic, something the kid couldn't even do. The examiner is surprised to hear that Rick only used level 1 magic to block the attack, so he decides to go up one level for the next one. He will use level 5 attack magic, so the examiner suggests that Rick use something higher than level 1 defense magic. Rick then shocks everyone yet again when he reveals that he can only use level 1 magic on offense and defense. Rick assures the examiner that he will be okay though, so the examiner takes offense as he believes that Rick is underestimating him. The examiner decides not to hold back and starts his incantation. He unleashes the level 5 attack, shocking everyone with its immense power, and even some knight worries about it from really far away. His name is Sylvester, and he rushes to the arena because he couldn't believe such a powerful attack would be used during an exam. Sylvester is then informed about Rick and how he was able to block a level 5 attack with just level 1 defense magic. He assumes it must be some kind of joke, but he is told that it isn't. It's just an impressive 32-year-old F-rank adventurer. Rick's report reveals that he was a guild receptionist for 13 years. Sylvester doesn't seem to know what a receptionist is though, and Rick's power makes him wonder if it's a title given to someone who has defeated a dragon. After the written exam, Rick expresses how confident he is that he aced it. Just then, the prodigy named Freed angrily approaches Rick. Rick barely remembers this kid, so he assumes that he's lost and offers to help him find his parents. The kid is furious though, and explains that Rick took all the attention away from him. Just then, Freed's older sister Angelica arrives and is upset that Rick made her brother cry. Freed says that the 40-year-old man ruined everything, but Rick angrily corrects him by saying that he's only in his 30s. Angelica only believes her brother though, and challenges the 40-year-old man to a duel. Rick points out that she just got her glove dirty, but Barehanded explains that picking up the glove means he has accepted the duel. Moments later, the two arrive in an arena, and Angelica declares that she must punish the old man. Duels in the kingdom allow each participant to propose one condition for the duel. Angelica proposes that the loser must act as the victor's servant until the end of their life, and her brother cheers her on. Angelica is a second-class knight, and Rick is shocked to hear that this means she's the same level as a B-rank adventurer. B-rank adventurers are powerful enough to defeat monsters on their own, but Barehanded still tells Rick to take it easy on her. Rick thinks she has it all wrong though, and points out that he's just an F-rank adventurer that just registered a couple days ago. Rick fears that he won't make it out of the duel alive, so Barehanded tells him to just remember his training from the past 2 years. Rick begins to be inspired by the training montage that plays in his head, but he remembers how terrible it was, and it just makes him throw up. Barehanded tells him to be more confident, and reminds him of the group that trained him. The group called Orichalcum Fist prides itself on being the strongest in the continent, and they consider Rick to be one of its members. Rick thanks Barehanded for restoring his confidence, and steps up to Angelica. Angelica knows that Rick is an F-rank, so she promises to refrain from ending his life. She prepares for the fight, and Rick can tell that she's a swordsman type that strengthens her body and weapons. Angelica wonders if he will be able to keep up with her speed, and Rick is shocked when she flies right past him. She explains that she slowed down just a bit for Rick, and she wonders if he's not talking because of how shocked he is. The little nerd laughs at the 40-year-old and explains that people call his sister the Flash because of how fast she is. Angelica declares that she will actually attack him this time without holding back, and she uses her incredibly fast attack again. Rick goes quiet again, but we see that it's actually because of how slow he sees Angelica moving. It's even slower than when Rick walks, so he wonders why anyone would call her the Flash. Rick easily dodges her attack, but Angelica thinks he just got lucky because only a handful of first-class knights are able to properly react to her speed. She is sure that he won't be able to dodge it a second time, but Rick is once again unimpressed by how slow she is moving. He can't believe that she's a knight and wonders if she became one through nepotism. Rick considers for a moment that he might actually be really strong, but he then laughs at the thought. Rick prepares to dodge the attack again, but Angelica trips and starts barreling towards him. Rick just barely manages to dodge her out of control attack, but Rick is oblivious. He couldn't read her movements at all, and assumes that it was an incredible skill of hers. This little incident makes him remember that he's just an F-rank, and there's a huge gap in skill between him and a second-class knight. Angelica knows that she actually tripped, but decides to pretend like the attack was on purpose. She declares that she will attack again, but move even faster this time. Her next attack takes a great toll on her body though, so she can only use it 3 times. She uses the attack that's supposed to be way faster, but it's still pretty slow in Rick's eyes. The clueless Rick fears that she might use another terrifying rolling attack again if he makes the wrong move, so he dodges carefully. Angelica is shocked and wonders what she should do because she can only use the attack 2 more times. She decides to use her last 2 attacks in succession, and Rick realizes that he needs to fight back. Just then, Angelica trips again on her last attempt. Rick thinks it's another terrifying technique and fears that his attack won't land in time. Dust goes everywhere and everyone watches in shock. When the dust clears, we see that Rick's attack created a crater in the ground. Angelica is horrified as she realizes that if she didn't trip, then Rick's terrifyingly powerful attack would have landed on her. The clueless Rick thinks that she purposely dodged it though, and she wonders who this guy is. Rick explains that he's just an F-rank adventurer that used to be a guild receptionist 2 years ago. Rick isn't sure he can do much against a second-class knight, but he will do his best during their duel and use it as a learning experience. He excitedly prepares to continue their fight, but he is shocked when Angelica just surrenders. Freed is shocked as well, and Angelica says that she will let him win this time. She tries to get out of there as quickly as possible, but Rick reminds her about the duel conditions. Rick didn't actually propose anything, but he's fine with using hers. Angelica doesn't want to serve him for the rest of her life, so she asks her legs to exceed their limits just 1 more time and runs away. Rick doesn't really consider it a victory, but Rionette reminds him that it's time for the results of the preliminary test. Just then, Rick is shocked when Rionette reveals that the other members of their group will be arriving soon. The terrified Rick wonders why they are coming, so Rionette explains that they want to see how Rick is doing. Rick has a really bad feeling about it, but it's too late as we see that the others are on their way. We then learn about a hero that attempted to defeat the ultimate monster called Kaiser. Doing so would have rewarded him a treasure that can grant any wish. This hero failed to defeat the beast, but he had faith that an adventurer would one day be able to do it. Back with Rick, all participants are told that they will be receiving the results of the test soon. Mana will be sent to their exam tickets, and if it glows blue, then they pass. Participants that pass will then participate in a mock battle for the second stage of the exam. Rionette tells the worried Rick to be more confident, and her kindness makes him wish he were 10 years younger so they could date. Rionette isn't worried about the results because if he fails, then she decides that they will just triple Rick's training. Rick is sure that he won't survive more training like that, but he doesn't have to worry about that as his card glows blue. Rick is glad to have passed the exam, but his attention turns when he smells something terrible. Just then, some noble named Raster introduces himself, and he compliments Rionette's beauty. Rick tries to introduce himself to his fellow exam taker, but Raster declares that he has no business with a middle-aged man like Rick. Raster says that he dropped something, but this just turns out to be a pickup line when he says that he dropped his feelings of love deep inside Rionette's eyes. Raster would like to make her his wife, but Rick intervenes and declares that Rionette is his girlfriend. Raster mocks Rick for being an F rank at his advanced age, but Rick points out that Raster looks like he's at least 25. Raster calls him an idiot as he reveals that he became an E rank at 14 years old. He is now an A rank and will be one of the examiners for the second stage of the exam. Raster tells Rionette to ditch the loser, but everyone is shocked when she refuses Raster's offer and says that she is dating Rick. Rionette then embarrasses Raster as she points out that his perfume is repulsive, and Rick realizes that this guy is what smells. Raster becomes enraged and tells Rick that he better hope that he isn't his examiner for the test. Rick apologizes to Rionette for saying she was his girlfriend, but she surprisingly didn't mind. She was actually happy that he got her out of that creepy situation. Raster, on the other hand, has come to hate Rick, and he vows to put him in his place. Just then, we learn that Frida and Angelica are his younger siblings, and they complain to him about some old guy bullying them. This of course makes him more upset, and he promises to never forgive the old guy that made his family cry. His siblings tell him Rick's exam number, and Raster comes up with a devious plan. The next day, Rionette reminds Rick to hold back his strength in the mock battle, but Rick has no clue why she would say that. Just then, some guy named Lynx explains that he will be in charge of Rick's test in the second stage. Rick is glad that his examiner isn't Raster, and Lynx thinks it's strange that a clerk in his 30s would decide to become an adventurer. Rick assumes that the guy is looking down on him, but Lynx is actually in awe of his determination. Lynx is a fellow middle-aged man, and Rick has inspired him. He can tell that Rick has a goal that is motivating him, and Rick can't believe that this guy knows so much. Lynx explains that it's because the two of them are very similar. Lynx became an adventurer at 25, and he is now in his 40s. It has taken him 20 years to reach B rank, but his goal is to become an A rank. Rick can tell that this guy won't give up on his dreams just like him, so he looks forward to testing with him. The two get along really well, as they even plan to get a drink after the exam, but we see that Raster is listening. After Lynx leaves, he thinks about how he can tell how much Rick has trained just from his handshake. This inspires Lynx to train harder, but he is shocked when Raster appears and says that he wants to talk. Back with Rick, Rionette can tell that he's in a really good mood, but participants in Rick's group are told that Lynx has fallen ill. Rick doesn't recognize the name when they are told that the replacement will be Raster, but he is shocked when Rionette explains that it was the perfume guy from the day before. She points out that he's probably related to the nobles he met earlier, and everyone else in the group laments having Raster be their examiner. They're all terrified of him, as he is known as the man of 1,000 spells. He has a more infamous nickname as well, which is the F-rank Crusher. Raster is called this because he torments participants that have gotten his attention. Rick is terrified to hear this because he did a lot more than just get Raster's attention. Elsewhere, Raster shows his immense power as he eliminates one of his own elite guards. Rick paces as he worries because he antagonized the guy that knows 1,000 spells. Rick considers himself to just be an F rank that only knows first nature magic, so he wishes he could just go home. Going home would result in his training getting tripled though, so Rick realizes that he's a dead man no matter what he does. Rick has lost all his confidence because people keep mocking him about his age, but Rionette believes that he can flip it. Instead of losing confidence, he can gain confidence when others insult him. Rick is unsure, but Rionette knows that he is strong, and she is confident that he will beat Raster and pass the exam. She has believed in Rick since the day he decided to become an adventurer, so his confidence is restored. Just then, a stranger calls him a young man, and this person can tell that Rick is struggling with something. He compliments Rick's youth and offers to do some fortune telling for him. Rick isn't so sure about it at first, but the guy offers to do the first one for free. Rick can't resist, so he goes to take a seat, but Rionette notices a magic circle on the chair. Rick disappears and the stranger reveals that he is actually Freed, and he declares that he's a great actor. Rionette demands to know where he teleported Rick, but Freed refuses to say anything. The furious Rionette demonstrates her terrifying power as she slices off all of Freed's eyelashes with just the slightest movement. Rionette terrifies Freed by declaring that she will take one of his eyes next, and even lets him choose which eye he will lose. Freed is absolutely horrified and reveals that he can only teleport objects 100 meters away, so Rick should be close by. Nearby, Rick finds himself outside the venue, and he is confronted by a large group of serious-looking guys. Some butler-looking guy explains that they're the elite guards of the Darmute family, and they need Rick to sleep for a while. Rick realizes that it's the noble family that just keeps bothering him, and the guards explain that they have to make it so Rick can't participate in the exam. Rick can't believe that they're resorting to dirty tricks like stalling him, but the butler points out that they aren't stalling him, they are ganging up on him. The butler reveals that their powers are equivalent to B and A ranks, and Rick realizes that there is no way he can win. Just then, a group appears, and Rick is terrified to see that it's the senior members of his party. They wonder why Rick is outside when he should be taking the exam, and the guards are shocked to see that the big guy looks like a talking orc. The guards confront the big guy, but for some reason Rick lies and says that this group is helping him warm up before the exam. The big guy says that he will help out as well, but Rick just gets worried and pleads for the butler to have his men back off for their own good. He explains that their lives are in danger, but the butler ignores him and tells his men to eliminate everyone. One guard tries attacking the orc, but everyone is shocked when his sword shatters on the big guy's head that doesn't even move an inch. The orc commends the guy for strengthening his body, but points out that he needs to do a better job strengthening his weapons. The guy tries to punch the orc, but he's easily stopped and his hand is shattered in the process. The orc surprisingly heals him and even gives him advice on how to stay more balanced during a fight. The blonde guy in Rick's group can tell that Rick is in trouble like always and decides that he will have to resolve the issue peacefully. This guy's definition of peace is pretty messed up though, as he pulls out a giant gun and explains that it's his newest invention. This thing is a crazy weapon as it fires magic-infused crystals. The guards try to attack him, but they just end up getting a taste of the blonde guy's weapon. Rick tells him to stop, so the guy assumes that he wants to try the weapon out himself, but Rick is just worried that the guy might end their lives. Just then, one of the guards comes up with the brilliant idea to take the little girl from Rick's group hostage. He threatens to take her life, but Rick gets horrified and wonders if the guard has some kind of death wish. Even the orc tells him to let her go for his own good. The little girl wonders what the guard is doing, so Rick tries to keep her calm and tells her that he just wants to play a game. She believes him and wonders what kind of game he wants to play, but the guard foolishly decides to make his intentions clear. He hits her, so she becomes furious, and Rick can tell that they are done for. She absolutely decimates the fool, and the rest of the guards are shocked because she unleashed 7th nature level magic without an incantation. The butler now knows exactly who this little girl is, and he reveals that she is the famous vampire mage. She is the strongest mage at only 10 years old, and she is known as the demon child of ruin. Alyssa Rhett is her name, and she isn't the only famous person among the group. The blonde guy is a half-elf, half-dwarf who is more than 50 years old. He is the world's best weapons craftsman, who many think he somehow has technology from 1,000 years in the future. His name is Mizet. As for the orc, he has great intelligence and superhuman strength. He is also a master of support magic, and his name is Brodston. The guards are then stunned to hear that they're all S ranks, and members of the S rank only party known as Orichalcon Fist. The butler never thought he would live long enough to witness them with his own eyes, but now that he has decided to retire. He plans to live the rest of his life in peace, and the guards have never seen the old man so tranquil. Alyssa then has some fun destroying everyone with her one-word spells, and Rick decides that he doesn't want to have to train under these crazy people again, so he promises to do his best to pass the exam. Back at the venue, Rionette is still tormenting Freed. Freed wonders how long she plans to keep destroying stuff, so she explains that she will keep going until Rick returns. Freed confidently declares that Rick won't be coming back because his family's taking care of him, but he is shocked when Rick casually says hi to him. Rionette sends the little nerd into a wall, and Rick wonders what happened to the place. Rionette assures him that everything is fine, and she only destroyed a small part of the building. Just then, the injured Lynx appears, and he explains that Raster beat him up. Rick is horrified to hear this, because he realizes that Raster did this, so he could be in charge of his exam. Lynx told Raster that his dream was to build a school in his hometown, but Raster just mocked and tormented him. Lynx couldn't do anything against someone powerful like Raster, and now he thinks that having a dream at his age is foolish. Lynx fears that Raster will do something much worse to Rick, so he begs him to drop out of the exam. Rick refuses to though, and declares that he wants everyone to know that it's fine to start doing things at any age. Back with Raster, he's busy taking out more of his own men, and one of his guards explains that there's an intruder. Raster's glad though when he realizes that Rick has decided to come. He thought that Rick would have dropped out by now, but this is okay with him, as he promises to show Rick what real fear looks like. Raster makes a grand display of his magic, but Rick still angrily declares that he will send Rick flying. In the stands, a guy named Ado watches the E-Rank exam and explains the 4 foundational faculties to us. They are physical strength, body control, magic reserves, and magic control. Ado has the ability to visualize the scores of other people's 4 foundational faculties, and he demonstrates it on one of the participants. He checks Raster and is amazed by his A-Rank scores. His eyes feel a bit strained because it's dangerous for him to look at anyone too strong. Ado decides to check Rick's stats, but they are so great that his eyes feel like they're about to explode, and he screams in pain. Nearby, Alyssa and Rionette introduce themselves to each other. The other members of Rionette's party call her over, so she invites Alyssa to join them. Alyssa is shocked to see an orc sitting there, and Rionette declines Mizette's offer to sit next to him because she knows that he has bad intentions. Mizette offers the seat to Alyssa after he takes an interest in her, but Rionette gets Alyssa to safety. Rick finally enters the arena, and Broston asks Rionette how their old rookie will do. Rionette reveals that he will pass the exam, but Alyssa points out that it won't be so easy because he's going against Raster. Raster is an A rank, and he always goes overboard to embarrass all the rookies. Alyssa is shocked though when the members of Rick's party say it won't be a concern. Raster's siblings cheer him on, and Raster is impressed that Rick was able to get away from his guards. Raster declares that he's nothing like his weak guards, but Rick can tell that just by looking at him. Rick wonders why Raster became an adventurer in the first place, so Raster explains that he's a noble, so he just did it to raise his status even further. He has actually grown bored of being an adventurer and is just waiting for the perfect time to quit. Rick can tell that this guy's not a real adventurer, so he refuses to lose to someone like him. Raster starts to fight off with a level 1 attack, but he wonders if Rick is terrified after not moving at all. Rick isn't scared though, as he's just reminding himself not to let his anger control him. Barehanded told him to use the first minute of his fight to calm himself and observe his opponent. Rick does that, but Raster is impatient, and Rick is stunned to see him use level 3 magic without an incantation. The insanely powerful attack hits Rick, but he remains standing strong as he's analyzing his opponent just like Barehanded said. Alyssa's worried about him, but Brosnan says that an attack like that is nothing for Rick. He explains that out of the 4 foundation faculties, Magic Reserve has to be developed before a person reaches the age of 20, otherwise there is no hope for further growth. Rick became an adventurer at 30, so his magic reserves are extremely low. However, Brosnan had a solution, and we look into the past once again. Brosnan told Rick that the one thing he could always depend on was his body, and he decided that they would take a little stroll to the next town over. The problem was that he strapped Rick to some giant weights that weighed 100 kilograms each. Rick was horrified, but Brosnan just told him to hurry up because there was a den of carnivorous monsters in the forest. To make up for his lack of magic reserves, Rick trained exhaustively in the other 3 areas. Raster attacks Rick with level 4 magic this time, but Rick once again is unfazed. Brosnan then reveals that for physical strength, he built Rick up from scratch. Even though Mizette hates doing bothersome things, he was the one that taught Rick magic control. Mizette took this responsibility because he didn't want Rick turning into a pile of ash after an attack one day. Rick was trained in body control by Barehanded, and Alyssa is shocked to learn that Barehanded is not just some normal maid. Rick amazingly latched on to all the training they threw at him, and he now stands within the realm of S rank, just like the rest of them. Raster unleashes another attack, and Barehanded explains that Rick has no awareness of how powerful he is. This is because no matter what kind of insane training they put Rick through, they always told him that an F rank should be able to do it easily. Just like the time Brosnan told him that an F rank can smash through a giant boulder with one strike. Raster does some trash talking as he unleashes a barrage of attacks, and Alyssa is horrified when one attack seems to crush Rick. Raster mockingly says that he went a bit overboard, but he is stunned when Rick emerges unscathed. Raster is annoyed by his resilience, and his siblings are shocked by the old man's strength. Raster powers himself up to finish the battle with his fist, but Rick just easily knocks him back. Rick now finally understands what Barehanded was telling him. Raster is so obsessed with the talents he was born with, he neglected to refine and further them. Raster has vast reserves of magic, but he is sloppy with everything he does. Against an opponent like Raster, Rick is sure that he can't lose. Raster says that Rick just got lucky, and his siblings are amazed when he finally decides to use his full incantation magic. His long incantation results in a crazy big fireball attack, but everyone is shocked when Rick easily stops it with just one hand. Rick declares that the attack was too sloppy, and Mizette explains that Rick worked his magic with a high degree of accuracy to block the attack. Rick was so precise that he didn't have to use 100,000th of the energy that Raster did to create the attack. This means that someone like Rick, with barely any magic reserves, can do stuff like that as long as they have precise magic control. Raster continues to say that Rick is just getting lucky and goes in for another attack. Rick is too quick for him though, so Raster must change his body to steel to avoid getting obliterated. Raster finally admits that Rick possesses abilities above an E rank, but still says that luck is choosing Rick's side. Rick can't believe that this guy still refuses to acknowledge him, so he points out that he wasn't even using magic, he was just using body control. Raster just wants to know how Rick got so strong in just 2 years, but Rick is insulted by the question as he thinks about his torturous training. He had to run through explosions, swim through monster capture fluid until he choked on it, and he wasn't allowed out of a dragon's den until he defeated it. Alyssa's horrified to hear just some of the training he went through, because normally someone wouldn't survive it. She is then shocked when Brosnan reveals that Rick didn't survive it. He lost his life multiple times, but Brosnan's heal can bring someone back to life as long as it's applied immediately after passing away. This kind of horrifying training was necessary though, because repeatedly breaking down and rebuilding someone's body is how they get stronger. Mizette was also impressed by how Rick stayed in there, no matter how crazy the training got. He looks back to his training with Rick and how he would kick Rick off a mountain so he could develop a sense of being able to see the wind. This of course led Rick to losing his life repeatedly, and Brosnan would have to revive him. Alyssa was just as guilty of this type of training, as we see that she would crush Rick under boulders. Rionette's training involved learning to cut falling trees by using their momentum, and this caused Rick to lose his life as well. Raster just assumes that Rick is lying because he refuses to believe that such terrible training even exists. And even if it did exist, he can't see anyone being motivated enough to go through it. Rick's response is simple: his dream is his motivation, and his dream is to defeat the world's strongest monster, Kaiser El Sepiot. Raster and Freed have a good laugh as they call Rick an idiot, and they can't believe that he is being serious. Alyssa knows that Kaiser El Sepiot is the ultimate monster that appears in the legends of the hero Yamato, and Brosnan reveals that Rick's goal is also the ultimate goal of their group, the Orichalcum Fist. Raster points out that the legends of the hero Yamato are just bedtime stories for kids, and defeating El Sepiot is the dream of a small child. Rick doesn't care what Raster thinks, as his dream has nothing to do with him anyway. Raster agrees and decides to put an end to their battle. He surprisingly uses level 7 magic to restrain Rick, but he tells Rick not to get too amazed just yet. Raster plans to show Rick what true talent looks like, and he wants to make it so Rick can never speak nonsense again. He finishes a long incantation and declares that he will show everyone the greatest magic a human can wield, level 8 nature composed magic. This is the greatest magic that Raster, the man of 1,000 spells, has in his arsenal. This is his ultimate move, and it results in Raster controlling a giant tree golem from the inside. Raster commands Rick to grovel before him, and he mocks Rick for planning to use some airshot attack. Rick declares that he will punch right through him, but Raster says he's being delusional. Rick asks Raster how many times he has practiced using the golem before, but Raster has no clue because he mastered it after only using it a couple times. Rick then shockingly reveals that he has used his airshot attack 100 million times. Raster's siblings think he's lying, and Alyssa wonders if 100 million times in 2 years is even physically possible. Of course, Brosnan reveals that it's possible, but only if space-time magic is used. Raster has heard enough, so he announces that it's time to crush Rick's dreams, just like he did to Link's. Raster launches his most powerful level 8 attack, but Rick breaks free from the restraints and shockingly stops the attack with his level 1 airshot attack. Raster mocks him as he is sure that he will crush Rick, but he is stunned when his golem begins to break apart. Rick's airshot then destroys Raster's golem. Raster refuses to believe that this could happen to a noble like him, but his golem is destroyed and he is sent flying into the stands. Rick now taunts the so-called noble elite, and he points out that his dream is still completely unharmed. Everyone is amazed to see Rick victorious because he just looks like a normal old guy. Rick's group congratulates him on his victory, and Rick finally realizes that he really has gotten a lot stronger. He can't believe that he didn't realize how strong he actually is until now, and thanks everyone for helping him. Just then, they hear Raster's siblings telling Raster to get medical treatment, but he's determined to speak with Rick. Rick can already tell that Raster is wondering how an elite like him could lose to a late starter like Rick. Freed must be held back from defending his brother, but Rick just has an answer for Raster. Rick simply explains that he limits the number of techniques he uses, and he trains himself exhaustively in them. Rick gives Raster some advice on how he can do the same, but the noble is still angry. Raster promises to be Rick's examiner again for his next promotion, and declares that he will win next time. Raster's siblings leave with him, but Angelica surprisingly shows Rick some respect. The next day, the participants that passed the E-Rank exam are announced over a loudspeaker. Their numbers are announced in order, so Rick patiently waits while his friends wait nearby. Rionette's surprised to see him so calm, so Rick explains that he was just remembering something. Rick thinks about his past and how he wanted to become just like Yamato. This meant becoming an adventurer to try and defeat Kaiser El Sepiot. Unfortunately, his mother thought it would be too dangerous, and his father wanted Rick to stop believing in fairy tales. One day, Rick found some hope as a doctor discovered that Rick had a marker indicating that he had an inborn skill. People who have the marker are extremely rare, but Rick was one of them. Rick was stunned to learn that he could have an incredible power like Yamato, but he was told that it wasn't something a person can manifest through training. Rick was still excited though, and he was told to just relax and wait for his skill to come out. Rick couldn't have been any happier, and he decided that once his skill manifested, he would proudly declare to his parents that he was going to be an adventurer. As the days went by, Rick's friend would ask if his skill manifested yet. It still didn't show up after a year, but Rick kept his spirits up and thought that it would reveal itself when he wasn't a kid anymore. Eventually though, he would become discouraged, and he was told that there are cases where people with the marker never manifested their skill. There are still a lot of adventurers that don't have any skills, so his friend suggested that he become an adventurer anyway. They told him how much money he could make, but money isn't why Rick wanted to become an adventurer in the first place. One day, Rick's mom was glad to hear that he was hired as a receptionist at a guild. His parents were proud of him for finding a stable job, so Rick accepted that this was his life now. Rick went about doing his new job, but he still continued testing to see if his skill had manifested. Years and years went by as Rick's parents aged, but Rick never stopped reading about the legends of Yamato. His daily life was as a receptionist, but Rick never gave up on his dream. One day, Rick explained to Alicia that monsters had been driven out of their lairs, so they had been wandering into town. Things are starting to get a bit dangerous, and some new quests would be announced soon. They were mostly low-level monsters, so he assumes that they would be D-rank quests. An adventurer named Zaid was a friend of Rick's, and he revealed that he was promoted to B rank. This marked the moment when a person could make a living just adventuring. Rick congratulated Zaid, but he couldn't help but be upset with himself. Rick had done the same job for 14 years, and he's gone nowhere. Meanwhile, Zaid had been promoted several times. Rick didn't have much to complain about because his life was pretty stable, but he couldn't help but think how far he would have gone if he had decided to become an adventurer. Just then, Rick heard screaming as a giant troll appeared in town. Rick was shocked because it was incredibly rare for a mid-level monster to be there. Rick heroically tried to protect a girl, but she just told him to get out of the way. This girl destroyed the beast, and Rick was shocked as this girl simply thanked him for trying to save her. This was when Rick first met Rionette, and she revealed that she was an adventurer. Rick assumed that she was a B rank, but she was not. Rick was then sure that she was an A rank, and he was super excited because he had never seen an adventurer fight up close. Rick was then stunned when she said she wasn't an A rank either, and she was actually an S rank. Rick was incredibly nervous because S ranks are the cream of the crop. He had a question to ask her because she is an S rank, but he hoped that she wouldn't laugh at him. Rionette explained that laughing would not be a concern because since the 9 years that had passed since she was 8 years old, she had never laughed. Rick just let it all out and revealed that he has always dreamed of defeating Kaiser Alcipiat. On top of that, he also has an innate skill that hasn't manifested yet. He explained that he was 30 years old, so he asked her if she thought there was still time for him to become an adventurer. Rionette acknowledged that Rick had courage because he tried to save her, but he was 30 years old, and he never trained his magic reserves. Rick already knew about this limitation, but Rionette explained that it's not just hard to develop magic resistance after not training it when you were young, it's basically impossible. Adventurers need at least some magic reserves, so she was confident that Rick had no chance at making it as an adventurer. Rick kept a positive attitude as always, and he thanked Rionette for the reality check. He could finally stop clinging to the dream he should have given up years ago. Rionette apologized, but Rick said he needed to hear that. He talked non-stop, hoping to mask his disappointment, and jokingly asked her to have a meal with him. Rick was shocked though when she accepted his offer, and she made plans for them the next day. The next day, Alicia could tell that Rick was in a good mood, and he excitedly told her that they should work their hardest. Zaid arrived, and the happy Rick excitedly gave him his quest. Rick couldn't believe that he was having dinner with a girl like Rionette, and he realized that his life wasn't so bad after all. Just then, people began scrambling as a monster had appeared, and Rick's good mood was ruined. Rick got worried when he spotted Rionette, but he remembered that she can handle herself easily. Rick was then startled when several more monsters appeared, but Rionette told him that she would handle them. Rick knew that he would only get in the way, so he stood aside while Rionette started destroying the beasts. She tore them to pieces, and Rick was amazed to see what an S rank could do. Rionette finished up the last monster, but she became concerned when she sensed something. Rionette had a flashback to a horrible memory, and she collapsed because of the terrifying magical energy. Another beast arrived to attack them, but Zaid appeared out of nowhere to rescue them. Some other adventurers showed up, and Zaid explained that the guild put together an emergency quest. The adventurers then worked together by using their amazing abilities, and they started annihilating the monsters. Rick thought he had already given up on becoming an adventurer, but watching this group fight made Rick realize that he was still jealous of them. Rionette warned him that it's too dangerous there, but Rick said they would be fine because Zayd is a B rank. Rionette was still terrified though, and revealed that a B rank wouldn't be enough to fight the threat that is nearby. Rick was shocked, and Rionette revealed that the threat was a dragon. Rionette said that every time she feels a dragon's magic, she loses control of the magic within her body. Rick was sure that a dragon would never appear there, but he was quickly proven wrong. A gigantic dragon appeared before them, and even Zayd couldn't believe that one would appear in a human town. Everyone was taught at the Adventurers Guild that anyone lower than a B rank should never try to fight a dragon. One guy from the group panicked and tried to attack it, but it quickly became very clear that there's no way they can fight the dragon when it pushed them back with just the force of its wing. The group decided to run for their lives, but they were stopped by the dragon's barrier. They are unable to destroy the barrier, so they realized that the dragon is not planning to let them get away. Zayd gave up as he believed their lives were over, but Rick shockingly stepped forward. Zayd reminded him that he was just a receptionist and there was nothing he could do. It turned out that Rick also thought they wouldn't survive, but if he at least stood up to the dragon, then he might at least be able to spend the last moments of his life as an adventurer. However, after coming face to face with the dragon, Rick realized that they wouldn't even be able to put up a fight. Rick was terrified, but he could still feel a fire burning inside of him. He thought he had given up on becoming an adventurer, but this feeling inside of him made him realize that this was actually the way he wanted to live. Rick then bravely launched a rock at the monster, but it didn't do anything. Zayd was inspired by what Rick had done, so he told the other adventurers that they couldn't let a receptionist show them up. The newly inspired adventurers then fiercely attacked the dragon. The powerful beast used its fire breath on them, but Zayd temporarily turned everyone to iron to protect them. The blast was too powerful though, so everyone was injured, and Zayd determined that this was really the end for them. Rionette hated herself for not being able to fight the dragon, but it was too late anyway, as the dragon prepared to end them all. Everyone had given up, but they were stunned when Rick emerged from the rubble. Rick became very serious, and he vowed that he would make his dream come true no matter what. Rionette was horrified though, when she could only watch as the dragon crushed him. Just then, a voice declared that Rick had acquired a skill, and everyone was stunned when Rick lifted the dragon's foot. No one could believe their eyes, and they couldn't even recognize Rick. He didn't look like himself at all, and there was so much magic overflowing from him that it was actually visible. Rick realized that his inborn skill must have just manifested, and he wondered what took it so long. Rick gained a ton of confidence, so he told the giant lizard to give him everything it had so he could test out his new skill. The dragon launched attack after attack, but Rick blocked them all. Eventually Rick fought back, and his attack was so incredibly powerful that it blew a hole right through the dragon's barrier and the dragon. Everyone including Rick was stunned by what just happened, and Rick humbly said that wasn't so bad, just before he collapsed. A while later, Rick woke up in immense pain, and Rionette informed him that every magic circuit in his body was destroyed. Rick had been asleep for an entire week, and he was shocked to hear that Rionette sat by his side the entire time. Rick couldn't understand why, so she revealed that she was waiting so she could invite him to join the party she belonged to, the Orichalcum Fist. Rick didn't believe her, but she explained that they share a common goal, and that is to defeat Kaiser Alcipiat. Rick was even more shocked by this part because it confirmed that Kaiser Alcipiat actually exists. Rick fought with courage alone, so Rionette was confident that he would be able to grow stronger and fight alongside her group. Rionette guaranteed that he would become an adventurer, and this was the first time anyone ever said anything like that to him. Rick broke down from the sense of relief, and he wondered if it was really okay for him to try and become an adventurer. Rionette assured him that it was okay, and Rick couldn't hold back the tears. Back to the present, Rick's number is announced, and Rionette congratulates him on officially becoming a fully qualified adventurer. Rick credits his mentors for teaching him, and he thanks his old self for never giving up on his dream. Lynx congratulates Rick on passing and reminds him about the drink they're supposed to get. Rick thinks it's a great idea, but he is shocked when Lynx expresses an interest in meeting his party and asks to visit them. Rick's face makes it clear that he is hesitant, but he agrees to let him meet them. A while later, Lynx is on his way to visit, but he thinks it's strange that Rick told him to wear his most powerful equipment. Lynx arrives at the designated location, but he doesn't believe he's at the right place because it looks like the Demon Lord's castle. After ringing the bell to the place, Rick comes to greet him. Lynx noticed that there were no monsters on his way to this place, so Rick explains that monsters don't go near there. This makes Lynx wonder why he needed to bring armor if not for monsters, so Rick explains that the armor will keep him out of a casket. Lynx is then introduced to the girls of the group. He hopes his own daughter will end up happy like Alyssarette, but he is shocked when Alyssarette uses a level 6 spell by just saying the word boom. Rick rescues Lynx from being obliterated, and he scolds Alyssarette for using magic in the castle. Lynx is stunned to hear that she just wanted to play, and Barehanded explains that she will have to deduct the cost of repairs from Alyssarette's food budget. Alyssarette begs for forgiveness, so Rick decides to spend some time with her so she can calm down. Lynx is left to relax for a while, and he marvels at how huge the place is. He goes to see Mizette outside, and Mizette explains that making crazy weapons is a hobby of his. Lynx tries out his latest weapon, and Mizette instructs him to put magic into it while pulling the trigger. The powerful recoil sends Lynx flying backwards, and the shot does major damage. The recoil was a bit too much, so Mizette decides that he will have to make some changes to the weapon. Lynx is stunned by the weapon because if it were mass-produced, then it would change war forever. Lynx is beginning to see just how crazy this place is, and he meets Broston next. Being surrounded by books calms Broston, and Lynx wonders if this intellectual orc is also a member of the party. Broston says that he has read most of the books in his library, but he hasn't had much time to read recently because he has been training Rick. Broston offers to give Lynx a training lesson as well, so Lynx eagerly accepts. Broston likes the look that Lynx has in his eyes as he senses the same light he sees in Rick. A while later, Rick is shocked to hear that Lynx went with Broston into the forest. Rick is terrified because he knows how dangerous that is. We then watch as the terrified Lynx screams because he thinks his life is about to end. He goes flying off a mountain and he says goodbye to his wife and kids. Luckily, he lands safely on the food that Barehanded has gathered for dinner. She notices the weights attached to Lynx and determines that this was Broston's doing. Lynx confirms this as he explains that Broston told him to run down a slope so steep it was basically a cliff. Lynx is sure that he wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Barehanded, and she explains that Broston ended Rick's life the most out of everyone that trained him. Lynx is so terrified by that statement that he pretends he didn't hear it, and Broston arrives to continue their training. Afterwards, Lynx is relieved to still be alive, and he tells Rick that Broston was only supposed to give him some light training. Rick warns Lynx that he can't believe any of them when they talk about easy training, but Broston arrives to point out that he can just bring people back to life if the training eliminates them. Rick reminds him how fragile lives are, but Alyssarette is tired of all the talking and just wants to play again. As the guys wait for dinner, Lynx wonders how close Rick has gotten to Barehanded. Rick explains that their relationship isn't like that, especially because he's too old. Lynx shocks him though when he explains that he and his wife are 20 years apart in age. He gives Rick some words of encouragement as he explains that all that matters is how they feel about each other. That night, everyone enjoys the feast Barehanded made, and they all compliment her. Barehanded goes to get some wine, so Lynx tells Rick that this is the perfect time to go and help her so they can get closer. Rick rushes off to help Barehanded, and Lynx asks to learn more about Rick's inborn skill. Broston reveals that Rick's skill is a type that is activated by certain conditions. This means that Rick is not able to activate it himself. However, thanks to the training, Rick now stands within the realm of S rank, even without his skill or weapons. Rick's skill is called Reckless Soul, and if it were to activate, he would surpass everyone, even the other members of Orichalcum Fist. Broston has a question for Lynx as well, because he works at Central. He would like to know about the magic stones known as the 6 jewels. They are the ones in the legends of Yamato, and Rick explains that their goal is to defeat Kaiser Alcepiot. The 6 jewels are magic stones that open the door to the place where Kaiser Alcepiot sleeps. The 6 jewels are activated every 200 years, and they should be emitting immense amounts of magic right at this moment as they have reached that part of the cycle. Lynx always questioned if the stories were real, but hearing them talk like this makes him confident. He has no information about the stones right now, but he promises to check the confidential department to see if he can find something. Just then, Rick asks if Lynx has any other good advice. He tried to help Barehanded like Lynx said, but she is great at everything and didn't need much help. The next day, a new adventurer wonders why she has to clean the guild when she has the ability to defeat monsters. She spots Broston asking to take on a certain job, but he is denied. Broston can't understand why though, because the job's danger level is only 82 and they can handle it easily. The girl adventurer thinks this group looks pretty strange, and she thinks about how she has never seen the guildmaster be so deferential with adventurers before. Rick uses his receptionist skills to see that they can take on this job as long as they have 2 A ranks in a 4-person party. Brosnan asks if they can have some help finding a 4th person, so the guildmaster agrees. He reminds the girl named Ray that she wanted to go on a quest with a higher danger level, but she is a bit hesitant to join the strange party. The guildmaster assures her that they are great adventurers, but all she sees is a talking orc, a little girl, and some old guy. Ray really wants to do a quest though, so she gladly decides to lend them her strength. On the quest, the group makes it clear that they are searching for a magic stone. Lynx told them that it should be in this area, and Ray wonders if it's worth a lot of money. The stone is quite valuable, but it's dangerous to handle without proper precautions, and it's capable of drawing monsters to it. Ray isn't worried though, because she is confident that she can handle any monster. She is only an F rank right now, but she is sure that she will be an A rank in no time. Rick reveals that he just reached E rank, and Ray realizes that he's some late starter old man just like she thought. Barehanded is back home, so she hopes that the others are okay. Mizette reminds her that Brosnan is with them, so they should be fine. The little weirdo then uses his gadgets to try and get a peek at Barehanded's delicates. Barehanded stops him though, and destroys his machine. Back with Rick, Brosnan determines that they're getting to the lair they are looking for. Ray is terrified to see a wyvern, and shocked that they are looking for a wyvern lair. She warns Brosnan not to get too close to the beast without a plan first, but Brosnan just doesn't seem concerned. He tells the ferocious monster to move as he sends it flying across the forest, and he tells Ray that the plan is just to knock down any monsters he sees. Ray fears that his attack will just cause more wyverns to appear, but that is actually what Brosnan wants. Brosnan tells Rick to get Ray to a safe area so she doesn't turn to ash, and she is horrified to hear how much danger she is in. Rick takes her to an open field and reminds her that she's supposed to be strong. Just then, a wyvern gets tossed right next to them, and we watch as Alyssa, Red, and Brosnan make quick work of a flock of wyvern. Ray is shocked by how far they are throwing the wyvern, and she is startled when a giant red one appears before her. Even an A rank would have a hard time against one of these, so she thinks they should run. Rick agrees that they should run away, but there is something he wants to check. He refuses to back down even if the odds are against them, so Ray decides that she will have to fight by his side. Rick can see how determined she is, so he allows her to back him up. Ray begins preparing a spell to protect Rick, but she is utterly stunned when Rick absolutely destroys the beast. Rick celebrates, as this confirms that he really is strong. The next day, Ray is exhausted, and the guildmaster explains that nothing good ever happens when the orichalcum fist shows up. A look back to the day before shows Ray wondering what they were going to do with the wyvern corpse. Their answer was pretty surprising though, as Rick explained that Barehanded was going to cook it for dinner. She can't believe that anyone would eat a wyvern, so the guildmaster explains that people say that members of the orichalcum fist are the strongest in the continent. He hopes that her experience with them made her realize that she shouldn't be going on dangerous missions, but actually just motivated her to train harder. Back with our group, we see that they were successful in obtaining one of the 6 jewels called the Crimson Blossom. It has an incredible amount of magic in it, and it should help them find the other jewels. Alyssa wants to be the one to activate it, but everyone decides against that because she would just blow it up like she does to everything. Mizette is the one to do it, and a map of a large city pops up. The city is called Heractopia, and combat flourishes in that country. They are also famous for their Colosseum. We then get a glimpse of a fight taking place at this Colosseum as a girl is announced the winner. Thanks for watching my recap. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach 700,000 subscribers.